That seems fair to me.
Fairness isn't the
really
issue.
think
If
you're
anything,
Well, if you don't know what fair is, you can't make a judgment on what fair is.
Unacceptable by any reason. You can't.
Donnybrook is made possible through the generous support of the members of KETC.
Well, thanks so much for joining us on this scorcher of a day. Great night to stay inside, watch Donnybrook, and maybe color on our Donnybrook coloring book. And thank our friends at the Gatesworth for making this program possible, as you do week in and week out. Let's meet the panelists who are around the big green table for this edition of Donnybrook, starting with the media veteran herself, Wendy Wiese, along with Mr. Bill McClellan, there he is, from the Post-Dispatch, and Ray Hartmann from St. Louis Magazine, and Mr. Alvin Reid from the St. Louis American, STLmag.com, and beyond. And Bill, we're going to start with you because I thought it was extraordinary that the former mayor of the city of St. Louis, Francis Slay, who in a departing moment just before he left office said, oh, by the way, we're going to privatize or try to privatize Lambert Field. And then he left office. Turns out he's part of a group now. He'll be working for a group that'll try and get the contract to run Lambert Field. Now, as a result, he's a public servant who might benefit and profit from his own actions. Doesn't that make you question whether, as mayor, he was representing himself or the people of the good city of St. Louis?
No, I'm not a fan of the privatization idea, but Francis Slay is now a lawyer in private practice, and if people want to hire him because they think he's politically connected or a terrific lawyer, that's fine. I don't have any problem with Slay working for the Spaniards. It's a Spanish company, right, that he's working for?
That is correct.
Right.
And actually, and you
Mucho
have
dinero.
and
Slay.
You have said that before in regard to other individuals who find themselves in situations as to why, people right out of office get jobs, Jay Nixon, et cetera. Yeah. So I hear you. At the same time, this is awful because not only is it, all right, the former mayor sets this in motion, then immediately gets in line for the trough. But we got Jeff Rainford, who was a mastermind of this too, and he's working for somebody that he will ultimately get paid if this goes through. You've got Reid, who was against this whole looking into the proposal at all until some of his guys that backed him up with campaign financing got a piece of their pie. This pie is divvied up so many different ways that the people of St. Louis and the county and everything else, it's just being ignored. It's like, who cares what you think as long as I get my money? Who cares what you think, or who cares if this is a bad idea as long as I get my money?
I would advise everyone to buy a lottery ticket because apparently something really amazing is going to happen. I agreed with Ray last week, and this week I'm agreeing and invoking Megan Green. Because when she said...
She's the alderman.
The alderwoman. She said, you really think that people are making this kind of stuff up. Mm-hmm. There was no discussion. It was like, oh, yeah, by the way, that whole privatization of the airport thing, good luck with that. Wait, what? When he was leaving office. This is, I love your positive attitude, Bill, but this stinks to high heaven, and we're going to continue to be.
If he was working for Frito-Lay, Bill, I wouldn't have a problem because he never had any business with Frito-Lay as mayor. But when you profit from the actions that you take as mayor,
well, and this is problematic on two levels. One, the optics of this are so beyond awful that I don't have a adjective for it. And the second one is that it speaks to the danger of privatization, to the points you're making, that if there's economic development benefits to be had around the airport, by all means the city should do everything in its power to capitalize on them. But when you're talking about an airport, you're not talking about millions, you're talking about billions. And when you're talking about billions, there's a lot of cash to go around for a lot of people, and the potential for bad stuff to happen is much greater. And it doesn't disparage Francis Slay individually. No one's questioning his character or anything. But the appearance of this is just beyond terrible.
Well, maybe I'm overthinking this stuff. But I would think that if I were the Spaniards, I'm not sure that Francis Slay is the best guy to have, just because it would look so bad if Lyda Cruz
they picked him.
But if
gives the
yeah.
contract to Francis Slay's people.
But if Francis Slay isn't concerned about that, then I'm sure the Spaniards, I think if I had that kind of money that I'm going to invest with a law firm, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that I've got a great shot. So I think they think they've got a great shot.
I think he's a very good hire by the Spaniards. But
Why is that?
Because the fix is
he's
in.
connected.
Because the fix is in. Like I said, most places I would say, look, I agree with you. Probably of 95 of the largest metropolitan areas in the United States, I would agree with you. But of the 5, St. Louis is one where this is just hard knocks. Like, hey, we don't care. We running like this is Pendergast, Tammany Hall.
It does. It looks a little bit like the mayor's cashing in on his public service, big time.
Well, but it makes us look like a backwater
Well,
town.
let me ask you this. This week, Wendy, there was a really major development in New York. Now, I think this was in the Bronx and in some of the
14th Congressional District.
Oh, okay, in New York. Wherever that is. I think the Bronx, maybe
Bronx
Queens.
and Queens.
Okay, sounds good. So a young woman, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who was a campaign volunteer and organizer for Bernie Sanders. She's far to the left. She believes in Medicare for all, and she wants to eliminate ICE and a guaranteed job by the federal government for every man, woman, and child. Well, as it turns out, she upset the number 4 Democrat in the House, Joe Crowley. Huge upset. And now some people are saying, I wonder if Cori Bush, who also was an organizer in the Bernie Sanders days, who is taking on Lacy Clay in the Democratic primary, has a chance to unseat Mr. Clay. What do you think?
I think anything could happen at this point in time. I think anything could happen. I think young people are really, really angry and energized. I think old people are really, really angry and energized. And as a result, I think that the two-party system as we've known it it's over. And I really do believe that. I think that's this whole "Make America Great Again." I think it's the rise of people like the socialist Democrat in the 14th Congressional District of New York. And I think Cori Bush, she's pressing the flesh. She is making a name for herself. I think Lacy Clay has been a terrific representative for the first, but I think it is time for a change. And I think that she might be the change that people are looking for. If you look at how close Tashara Jones came to upsetting the apple cart, 800 votes, or she would be sitting in the city hall.
I'm stealing a line from Charlie Tuna on KFNS. He said, like, she would have won if she didn't have to run against the Temptations. If it had just been the OJs, 3 of them, she probably would have made it.
Yeah.
But as far as Clay is concerned, I thought that what was interesting, and here's another thing that young people do that I am not into, and obviously it's Twitter. They have been in contact with each other. Riverfront Times had a great article on it, and they were in communication with each other. And when this young lady won there, said, like, back it up, America, and she cited like 4 races. And this was one. And I said, you know what? That resonates. It may not mean anything to me, but it means something to people that are going to show up and vote in August, and it's interesting.
And I think a lot of the young people looking would dispute you, Wendy, that Lacy's done a great job in the first. I mean, I think
I'm sure
people
they
look
would
and
too.
go that, well, you know, the first hasn't done much under the Clays, and I wouldn't be surprised.
There's one other thing. Today on Politico, Ms. Cortez, I forget her first part of her name.
Alexandria
Ocasio-Cortez. In the story there, she talked about, in the political story today, she mentioned that she's forming a non-corporate PAC, and she mentioned 3 or 4 races, one of which was Cori Bush's. I mean, she mentioned it by name on the website today. I know when I was at the march, the anti-NRA march, the March for Our Lives in March, and talked to a number of the younger organizers just about things, Cori Bush's name came up several times. And so Certainly, Lacy Clay has been very, and I wouldn't be predicting.
Well,
yet he's got a strong base. He
That's right.
handled Russ Carnahan rather handily. But I will tell you that this is a different world, and I don't think.
Well,
that
let me ask you
he
this:
should rest.
what if Ocasio-Cortez comes to St. Louis?
Oh,
She probably will.
She probably will.
She probably
Right.
will. She doesn't have to worry about a general election. If she's mentioned in 3 or 4 races, I would not
Yeah,
at all
I guess so. Okay, and let's move on to another topic, Alvin Reid.
All right.
State Senator Jamila Nasheed has asked the new governor, Mike Parson, to declare a state of emergency in the city of St. Louis. She's taking a look at the homicides, 79 as of recently, which is actually lower than the rate last year. Still too many, 79 too many, we'll admit that. But she's saying, look, we've got to do something about the homicides in the city of St. Louis. What do you think of this action?
Well, one, it's kind of like be careful what you wish for, because you start talking about state of emergency, what do you mean? And in the past, I've said, like, listen, if there's a situation where National Guard or, we're needed, all right, if you want to do that, okay? But you need to put some parameters on that before you go to the governor and say, like, hey, whatever you want to do it in these communities. I'm a little hesitant to go that far. Then two, and I like and respect Senator Nasheed. I'm not laying this label on her, but tomorrow, I think on Friday, the Clergy Coalition is having a press conference about violence in the city of St. Louis, and the mayor is going to be there, and Jimmy Everett's going to be. How much is this photo op? How much is this the same old, where you said, like, yeah, we went and talked tough about crime, and we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and we ain't going to do nothing.
Oh, come on, Alvin. Aren't you running the risk of being a little too cynical?
I could be.
The Clergy Coalition was on the front page of your paper just 2 weeks ago, and they're urging people to snitch, to turn
agree,
in somebody.
but
And so they're getting active. And, we actually just had to release a guy accused of murder.
I agree, because nobody showed up.
The witness wouldn't appear. So I praise the Clergy Coalition for doing
But
this.
why? My question for Senator Nasheed would be, why now? I mean, why in almost July
know.
of
That's a good question.
2018? Because this is nothing new. This
Right.
has been going on forever, and
We gotta do it sometime.
Yeah, I was going to say
Wendy.
that doesn't make it. I think first of all, one thing that's interesting about it, and I don't know if it has to do with the timing, is we have a new governor who, to his credit, answers press inquiries. But one of the answers to this one, which is traveling or whatever, was that the governor has already met with Lyda Krewson and is concerned about crime across Missouri. And I thought it was an interesting response in that, even in the context of meeting with Lyda Krewson, I think it brings out the question of whether, and I say good for Senator Nasheed, because whatever would come from the state of emergency in terms of state funds or state action to deal with this is needed, and with the current layout we have now, with the new governor who seems like a fine guy but is not a St. Louis person, I think anything that St. Louis and Kansas City legislators can do to stand up for our interests is a good thing.
All right, very well. Hey, Bill, I want to ask you, going from St. Louis to St. Charles. The University of Missouri had some beautiful property on the bluffs there overlooking the Katy Trail and sold it to Greg Whitaker of Whitaker Homes, the man who started Newtown St. Charles. As a matter of fact, you and I were out there one night talking about one of your books to a fine audience out there, if you'll recall, and many years ago. Well, now he set his sights on this property overlooking the Katy Trail, and there was a plan to put up about 400 homes. He scaled it back to about 200, added some trees, and it was approved this week by town mothers and fathers that these beautiful homes will go up on the bluffs. Environmentalists are going crazy because they think it's too close to the Katy Trail. I happen to like homes on bluffs, whether it's on the Pacific or in the mountains. How about you?
Well, I don't. I mean, and one of the, I think it's a terrible idea. And I think the University of Missouri is just a money grab, and I don't know why the St. Charles Council is going along with it. But one of the points that hasn't even come up is Carl Stelzer, who did the documentary First Secret City, former RFT guy,
Sure.
Guest on the Charlie Brennan show, was telling me that that's right by a radioactive site, and it just seems kind of strange that we're talking about building homes on a radioactive site at the very same time we're still dealing with the Cold Creek.
Coldwater Creek.
Yeah, Coldwater Creek. You know, and the cancer clusters there, and
Weldon's Ring.
yeah,
Weldon's Ring.
and now
And
we're suddenly
Westlake
we're
landfill.
suddenly gonna put Coldwater Creek over here and build new homes next to another trouble site. It doesn't make much sense to me.
You know, when these things happen, and we got one, you know, they want to develop Sugar Creek in Kirkwood, and very many people are opposed to that. And look, I kind of stand with those that would like to be pristine, but it's always, you know, it's somebody else's neighborhood, and like, you know, where they said like, hey, we're going to do this and build a, you know, subdivision on a creek and tear out a bunch of trees where, you know, nothing had been before, i.e. Lee Avenue. There's no big fuss, there's no big muss. So I think people kind of get involved in matters that don't pertain to them individually for big projects like this. But let's protect all trees. Let's protect all green space. You know, and so I got a little problem.
Well, Alvin, the citizens seem to be against this. I mean, in
They
all
are
the meetings
against
they've
it. They are
had,
against
everybody's
it.
outraged.
The
I mean,
Katy Trail, people come from all across the metropolitan area to visit the Katy Trail. I am old-fashioned. I think the only thing that should sit atop a bluff, I think this is as God and nature intended, is either a coyote or a winery with an extensive parking lot. I think
winery.
that should be on.
I think
on
that's
a
well
bluff.
said. And
But no, honestly, I think that when you start putting subdivisions on top of bluffs, I have a real problem with
This
that.
speaks to our lack of perspective, is what it speaks to. And yes, you can't save every blade of grass. I saw what happened where I grew up. I fought my way off the streets of
Creve
Main
Coeur.
Street. The area I was in, there's all kinds of wooded area. This isn't, I mean, it's getting kind of ancient history, but it's a half a century. But it's still a half a century later. The quality of life for people who move there to get away from too much congestion and too much everything is no different than what they moved to get away from. In St. Charles County, whatever one thinks about the politics of sprawl and this and that, this is a great example of not giving enough credit for how beautiful some parts of that county are. And there's so many other development opportunities. There's so much unused stock in the city and the county, and probably now even in St. Charles. It's just non-perspective zoning is what it is.
You know
it's
what?
just
It
not
is
good.
true. The last person who moves out to a place like that wants to be just that, the last person. But wherever you live now, I bet it was pristine land to somebody at one point. And in fact, the arch, you know, where
what's wrong with
Laclede and
keeping some
Shoto
pristine
started a
land?
city
But
is on
somebody-
a bluffs, and you go to New Hampshire, or Colorado, or California. You see homes on bluffs throughout this country.
what about
That's
the
New
radioactive
Hampshire and
waste?
Colorado.
What about that problem?
Well, I
Sally?
hadn't considered the radioactive waste, but I'm not saying I'm buying a home there, but I would think that someone buying a home there would do some due diligence and have the property examined.
I say a tip of the hat to somebody like Mike Elam, who apparently has done his homework. He is listening. Seriously, he's on the council in St. Charles. He said he has never heard anything like this blowback to this particular idea.
And Joe Cronin, who's on the council, who said, who abstained, I think, who said, what's the rush? There's a lot of things we don't know.
Well, it's interesting
and
how
that makes sense to me.
It'd be interesting because we don't get involved with the St. Charles County politics like we do in St. Louis County and the city. And it'll be interesting. It's interesting that the folks in St. Charles County don't seem to be in step with their council. And my point is, it is important that the pristine land in St. Charles County is a big part of it.
Your alma mater had this property for years.
Shame
on my alma mater.
Your alma mater could have built anything it wanted without a permit.
right.
So it's not like we're changing the world as it was. It's always been developable.
My alma
but
mater
now for
ought to
residential.
respect the Mother Nature
And
a
the
little more.
wishes
And
of
the
the
gift that was
people.
given to them
My
without the
alma
idea
mater.
of that.
That's
is
right.
This is a much worse day than all this nonsense about the football team. This bothers me more about my alma mater, that it doesn't have more respect
More
for
than the
Mother
football
Nature.
team. Well, that's a serious concern you have.
Well, Bill,
wow, now we're getting
Bill,
really
I would
brass
never
tacks.
buy a house near radioactivity until they knock $200,000 off.
Yeah, right.
Good,
exactly.
good for CD for bringing that up.
All right.
That's fine.
Ray, I want to ask you about tariffs. I don't know if we've ever discussed tariffs on Donnybrook before. I don't recall. but the president has put some on Chinese steel and aluminum, and apparently the price of steel is going up. And at least one nail manufacturer in Poplar Bluff says they're going to lay off 60 people as a result. So the president's tariffs have also resulted, apparently, in 600 new jobs at the steel plants in Granite City. So maybe it's an issue of winners and losers. But do you think there will be enough problems with jobs and tariffs that the Trump base will turn on their man?
Absolutely not. Now, I do think that Claire McCaskill's folks might make a campaign commercial out of the job loss and say, look what this protectionist, ranting and irrationality has brought us, and I think it would make a decent commercial for her. But the old thing about Trump's base, for the most part, would not mind it if he shot somebody in Fifth Avenue, whatever it was. And the idea, if you believe that Donald Trump personally cares about people in Poplar Bluff, then some, say, shyster real estate developer like Donald Trump from New York might sell you the Brooklyn Bridge.
I'll say this, that I don't know. I don't think his base will turn. But you make a good point about how does this affect other political races. But I'll tell you what, I get gasoline at Sam's. I'm a Sam's Club member.
Sure.
Sorry, those who hate that. But anyway, it's like people are bracing for something because gas is like cheaper than it is other places. But every time the last week when you go to get gas, it's long. And it's like people are like, something is going to happen. And I think with these tariffs, everybody's kind of like, boy, one day we're going to walk in someplace and something we paid $1 for is going to cost $3. Then the reaction will come.
Well, I will say if people lose their jobs, they'll turn on Trump. But since the first of the year, the Bureau of Labor Statistics says that we've added 100,000 construction jobs, about 95,000 manufacturing jobs.
I hear that.
So this is a good time for the worker.
Yeah, but what have we learned about America? It's when the BMW that I paid $75,000 for 2 years ago, I got to pay $125,000 for. The thing I bought in Walmart cost $2.18. All of a sudden, the Chinese slap some tariff on it, and it costs $5.12.
Then people will turn on Trump,
and that's when the masses will do it.
If he can effect change, if he can create any type of a situation where he gets Mexico to blink or Canada to blink or the EU to blink, and I think this is what he does. I think this is a game of chicken, because when people in the boot heel start to, the ones who work at the nail factory, their production's slowing down and the cost of everything coming in, everything is going up, then that's going to be that could be catastrophe.
It could be.
Right. I agree with Ray. I don't think that the Trump supporters care one way or the other. I mean, no, they blame it on the liberals, and right now things are going very well. The economy is cooking, and
but you do have a lot of really awful trade deals that have been negotiated, apparently. And so if this is that bargaining that he likes to do,
first of all, that's not it. First of all, this whole thing that awful trade deals is actually not true. But second,
it actually is.
Well, no. I mean, I'm saying that this is the generalized stuff that he's saying is not.
There's winners and losers.
There's every trade deal is complex.
Who oppose
but
him.
The point is, and when none of us are trade experts, but the point is, this is not about trade policy. It's about silos. It's about the red silo and the blue silo, and the people in the red silo, the Fox News silo, versus the other ones.
No, I don't think so, Ray.
They're not.
We're talking about guys who probably voted for Trump, and they're losing their jobs in Poplar Bluff.
Like Bill says, they'll blame the liberals.
And maybe 60 of them then, the ones who lose, will turn, like you said, 200 in Granite City. Yeah. And the economy is going pretty well, and I think the people who voted for Trump are getting just pretty much what Trump promised.
Okay, Alvin, Reid,
let
me ask you on the final topic. It turns out that the Post-Dispatch's reporters found an early manuscript of the book, the best-selling book, Resilience, by Eric Greitens, before he was the governor of the state of Missouri. And in the original manuscript, he wrote chapter on chapter on resilience. In later manuscripts, it turns out these were letters. The chapters were turned into letters to a veteran somewhere else in the United States. And so some people are saying it's literary fraud because he turned the paragraphs into letters. You're not concerned about this, are you?
Well, I am. Absolutely. Look, I don't want to sound like, just Joe author and journalist. But at the same time, I mean, this is dishonesty. And one thing that we've been kicking around about the governor is we all came away with the impression that, man, if nothing else, he's dishonest. And this is just more of the same. And really, people should look at this and say, like, if you had known this before he ran for governor, all right, maybe you would have ignored it. But now that he ran and we went through all this, say like, yeah, some more dishonesty.
Well, there's all. Go ahead.
I just let me defend the governor for a change.
Wow.
I thought this. First of all, I think it was the Republicans who discovered this. I think it was Representative Barnes.
Jay Barnes.
Jay Barnes.
Okay.
And the Post was reporting on what Jay Barnes said.
Very well.
But I thought it was just a literary device. He decides to write a book about character or resiliency or whatever, and he starts doing it one way, his thoughts. And then later he gets the idea of, hey, why don't I do it as if this were a series of letters? And so he does it as a series of letters. I didn't find it fraudulent or dishonest, Alvin.
It's really, I don't think the specifics really matter much about this. I mean, I don't think that this is some huge crime he committed, but to say that Eric Greitens has proven to be dishonest is sort of the Department of Redundancy department. I mean, it's just really no. I mean, his dishonesty is the theme, and it fits that narrative.
To drive a stake through the heart of political Count Dracula. They want to make sure that he doesn't rise from the ashes and run again and have a chance.
Okay, thank you all of you.
They being
Thank
the
you all of you.
Republicans in the
They being the
legislature.
Republicans in the legislature, you bet.
Come back to
Speaking
St.
of
Louis.
letters, here are some of them which you wrote last week. Alvin's idea of St. Louis wards to include both the north and south sides is great. It'd bring St. Louisans together to discuss the entire city, not just one area. Let's hope city dwellers agree. That from Jim McQueen of St. Louis. And we heard from Kelly White, who wrote, according to the responses from Ms. Wiese and Mr. Hartmann, mass murder suspects should also be released without any cash bail requirements. After all, they're only accused and haven't been convicted yet. Thank you, Kelly White. We'd like to hear from you. Turn your chapters into letters and send them to KETC 3655 Olive Street, St. Louis, Missouri 63108. Don't forget those emails, letters@ketc.org, or those tweets. Hashtag Donnybrook STL, because Wendy and Ray are going to read them in just a matter of moments on your turn. That's when they'll take your phone calls as well. The rest of us will see you next week at this time. Thanks for joining us, but don't touch that dial.
Donnybrook is made possible through the generous support of the members of KETC.